Today, we continue on breaking down prospects, going with one of my favorite non-top tier-ish guys, and AJ Griffin from Duke. We'll get to his strengths, his weaknesses, his fit in the NBA, all on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News, and today we are right back into diving into these top prospects around where the Pacers should be picking in that 1 to 7, 8 range. Lots of interesting prospects this year. And today we're talking about one of my favorite guys who isn't considered in the consensus-ish top 4, and that's AJ Griffin from Duke. Joining me to do that, one of our Locked On NBA draft hosts. You can find him at DraftDummies, which is ironic because he's not a dummy, on Twitter. Sam Ferris. Sam, how you doing, man? You enjoying this time of year?
I am always enjoying this time of year, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to talk some AJ Griffin today.
Yeah, watching Duke is funny because everybody wants to watch Paolo, but AJ Griffin has a lot of standout plays to me. I have one of my favorite clips of him creating space for a corner three where he just steps back like 40 feet in one step, I swear. We'll talk about his just general strengths first, and I have quite a few long-form notes about what I think he's really good at because I said this already, but AJ Griffin's one of my favorite guys in this draft. Like, I'm very tempted to move him into my top 4. I'm that into the way he can play. And something that is really interesting about him, this is a little too in the weeds for a very first thing I'm going to say, but when he catches the ball, he has this super wide base with his feet. Yeah. And that allows him to really be shifty and get around guys. And his attack off his first step off catches, because he does that, is always like right at the basket. He never has a false step or goes backwards. So just the way he moves off the ball into his catches it's such a unique and niche skill, but it's something that's like kind of unlike any prospect I've seen in a while.
Yeah, and that wide base is kind of a theme for him too, because I'm sure we'll talk about this in the strengths category, but the jumper is the number one strength with AJ Griffin. And you see that same very wide base. Some people joke around, if you followed baseball in kind of the late 90s, early 2000s, it's almost reminiscent of a Jeff Bagwell, where it's very wide base, got the deep knee bend, but I don't really worry too much about that because the finished product and the numbers indicate that he is an elite jump shooter for his size and for his age. So if we're talking about the strengths with AJ Griffin, we have to start there with the jumper.
Yeah, I think the stats almost speak for themselves at 44.7% from deep with very repeatable mechanics. And the thing that's interesting, if you watch a lot of his threes, is there are a lot of right wing threes. He loves that, but his corner three is really money as well. And I really buy him as a shooter, which is part of why I have him really high. Just like you mentioned, the shooting being such a big part of it, because over half his shots are threes, like the 3-point attempt rate being so good. Like, he's really good at getting them up. And I can't remember who it's against, maybe Notre Dame. I have it clipped. I should just share it. But he does this sometimes, or if he gets closed out hard, he'll shot fake, take one dribble to his left, and just monster step back. Creates a ton of room with his step back, and that's because of this wide base, which is such a dumb thing for you to start on. But it allows him to take the perfect first step and jump back to create more space for his three, which is, again, such a weapon for him. It's such an impressive set of skills to have a base of, and on a Duke team that is very weird on offense. I don't really know how to describe Duke this year offensively. Gross. He found ways to still use his three ball as a threat, even when things were kind of clogged up or slower for that Blue Devil team.
Yeah, so the numbers on that, you hinted at the 44.7% from three, also 79% on free throws. And also I'll add to that 2 other stats. So I like to look at just straight up spot up jump shots off the catch. He shot that at over 46%, which is crazy good for a kid his age too. And then I remember tweeting this out because I think the last 2 weeks he did go on a little bit of a mini slump, but with 2 weeks left, he was sitting at 50% from three, which would, he just shot it unbelievably well. Something you don't see from a teenager that often. And so, yep, that's his number one skill.
53.5% from CBB Analytics shot charts from that right wing three that is his go-to spot. Floppy was like Duke's thing this year. 53.3% from the left corner, his other spot. The shooting is a really big one for me. And another part of it that's interesting is, and this is another thing that I really like about prospects in general, and I'm going to talk about Karis LeVert for a second, which seems strange, but Watching him on the Pacers, something that kind of as his career evolved made him a better scorer is he got the floater, which was a big counter for him to be able to finally finish over bigs because his finishing right at the basket's not very good. AJ Griffin's floater's pretty nice when he gets run off the line, like when he gets kind of into that 5-foot range. That was something that I thought was pretty good, and it allows him to, not necessarily like ISO guys. I don't think his ISOs are awesome, but when he's attacking switches, the fact that he can get to that floater in the lane, he finished pretty well, like inside of, I'd say 8 feet, 7 feet, just to make up some distances. I like that floater game, and I think that counter will help well for him. Again, because he's already such a good shooter, but because he can attack so well off the first step, I think switches in general will not be something that is particularly challenging for him as he grows in the NBA.
Yeah, I'd categorize that under kind of the whole umbrella of touch with the free throws, the shooting, the floater. That's all there for him. The one thing I might add to that, though, which you kind of alluded to, is he didn't get all the way to the rim very often. There could be a number of different reasons for that. Kind of the main theme that I would say with AJ Griffin, the number one theme is the shooting, but the number two theme is just where is he athletically as it pertains to his recovery from injuries? Because the injuries were the story of his young career. In high school, he had a dislocated kneecap, which was a really rough injury for him, end of his junior year. And then I don't think he played for the whole year after that. And then coming into Duke, he then sprained his knee again and kind of delayed his start to the season. And so if you believe in AJ Griffin as a top 6-7 prospect in this class, I think you have to bake into that. Like, you have to believe that his athleticism has not fully returned yet, that hopefully with a strength and conditioning team in the NBA, they can get him closer back to where he was pre-injury. Because he has the shooting, the physical tools in terms of the frame at 6'6", 6'11", with very good strength are all there. And so just that one missing piece where it's a really big variable for him is like, where is he on that scale of returning to his full kind of peak athleticism? And is he really ever going to get there at all? Or is this injury just going to kind of sap him long-term of his peak athleticism?
Yeah, I actually found that out backwards, the knee thing, because I forget what the first game I pulled up was, Miami maybe, for Duke, and he wasn't starting. And I was like, why is AJ Griffin coming off the bench? So then I Google AJ Griffin bench, and it's like, oh, he's coming from this knee thing still. So they're kind of easing him in. And I didn't realize that it was such a long thing that, like you mentioned, his senior year didn't play much, and then gets to Duke, hurts it again. So that is always a concern for these guys, especially with knees. And I agree with you that the athleticism thing is interesting. Like, I was blown away by occasionally when he would get like an open lane to the rim, he wouldn't dunk, and that's not like a bad thing. He still made the shot. Like, I think he finished 70%-ish at the rim. I don't remember the exact number, but he didn't dunk. And I was just like, you're 6'7", like just dunk the ball. And that's always like a dumb thing to be concerned about. But I always, he didn't have the oomph sometimes.
Yeah, no. And that's a huge thing with him is, and you don't see him dunk that often. Only 8 dunks on the year, didn't get to the rim that often. And 6'6", 6'7", like you said, but also the long arms too. So that's the big question for him. I don't like to often use the term of like high ceiling, low floor, because I think in general, we don't do a very good job of assessing who really has a high ceiling and low floor. That it's just so hard to do. Like, if you follow the draft, that oftentimes the older players are talked about as high floor players, and that frankly doesn't end up really being the case.
As a person who covers Chris Duarte's team, I'm well aware of the notions of older players. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm tentative to use that, but I think it's somewhat reasonable to use with him just because of the big variable of, is he fully recovered from the knee injuries, or is he going to get closer back to the peak athleticism? That's the big question with him.
See, and maybe I'm wrong about this because I haven't really seen this said or written a ton, but I agree with that. That's something I would like to see as he grows in the NBA. Like, I don't want to compare him to Franz Wagner because Franz Wagner I'll get to the specific thing. They're not comparable players, but in the NBA, Franz Wagner stood out a lot to a lot of people because he never got sped up, right? His pace, his speed in the lane with the ball, he was going to do his thing. And I think AJ Griffin's really good at that in a way that his athleticism won't necessarily be a detriment. Like, when he's going to attack, he knows what his move's going to be. He does it at his speed. He doesn't rush it. He doesn't cough it up a bunch or anything. Super low turnover rate. And he doesn't pass that much, so that's going to help that. But in general, I thought that he never got sped up. He knew what his moves are going to be. He knew kind of what defensive manipulation was coming in a way that he got over that athletic hurdle sometimes when he needed to. And I thought that was something that if the athleticism doesn't come, I still believe in his general floor game because of that.
Yeah, no. So I would actually say that potentially the athleticism and like the burst, the twitchiness, that might actually affect him defensively more so.
Oh,
Like what level he can get to be as a defender. Like to me, that's the biggest variant for him as a prospect.
agreed.
So you brought up the Franz Wagner comparison. Maybe one that I was thinking of going off of someone from last class would be kind of like a Moses Moody, where Moody isn't a great athlete. He's improved since he got into the NBA. Again, with the Warriors, with a strength and conditioning program. But if we're saying that Griffin doesn't get back to where he was athletically, still a very good shooter, still a very good frame, still a smart defensive player. And so, like, even if he doesn't get back to that, there's still a role that he can play valuably, especially with that size and the ability to shoot the ball like he can.
Hey guys, short little break here to talk about PrizePicks. NBA fans, are you looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA? Then you need to try the award-winning app PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love it, and I know you will too. What is it? Well, it's easy to use daily fantasy. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections. You can up to 10 times on any entry. It's just you versus the projected numbers. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's super easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals. You can use their award-winning app on the App Store or Google Play. And they offer any prop you can think of. Points scored, rebound steals, you name it, they got it. They have mixed sport entries. So you can do, NBA with ongoing MLB, get some of my Phillies guys on your group. And they don't just offer NBA and MLB. They also have college football, college basketball, NFL, soccer, MMA, and more. For a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point, just one. But you got to use the code NBA when you sign up. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. Sign up today on PrizePicks. Use the code NBA. If a player in your first entry scores a single point, you'll get $50 for free. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. The defense, and I just want to hop over there now.
Yeah, for sure.
I have some trouble with his defense, and some people have characterized his defense as good, and I agree that with your word that you just used of smart, but he gets cooked a lot by
Yeah.
like quick guards just blow past him. And it's always so strange to me because he's not slow. So his footwork's not great there. That wide base actually hurts him on that end of the floor. And so, I've seen some people kind of laud his defense. I don't think it's bad, but it's bad on fast guards, and it makes it hard for me to like perfectly contextualize or evaluate his defense because I always like am wanting a little more, even though it's not always terrible. How do you evaluate him on the end of the floor?
Yeah, so there's kind of a big debate going on draft Twitter right now with regards to AJ Griffin defensively. I've seen people, I don't remember who said these, so I'm not going to guess at who it was, but someone said that he was like the worst defensive prospect in the entire draft class, and then a bunch of others pushing back. And the number one thing that I would say that I always repeat when it comes to defense, especially with guys that are teenagers, is that teenagers are never good defensively. They just never are. And so I think sometimes we can like outsmart ourselves. And I think probably the number one mistake you can make as an evaluator, in my opinion, is digging too far into the details, too far into the weeds defensively, reading into things that might not be there. And so what you have to do, in my opinion, with teenagers is number one, look at the physical tools that they have. Because we've seen guys that just don't try that hard in college or just don't know where to go, where to rotate. Plenty of guys that ended up being very good defenders, from a Klay Thompson to a Ben Simmons. And so we've seen this before. You don't want to overreact to teenagers being bad defensively in college. Just look at the physical tools, and then they have to have some level of feel, some level of sense defensively. So yes, you have to watch enough to get that level of comfort with them. Because if they have no clue what's going on, then chances are that's never going to happen. But again, I just think it's a mistake when they're so young to read too much into the weeds and details. And so I'm kind of in the middle here where he has the tools. He's 6'6", 6'7" with a long wingspan. And something I always say is length at the position is the number one indicator, the number one thing you want to look at regarding translation on defense from college to the NBA. So he checks that box. And then, we can debate where you think he is in terms of his smarts and his feel, his processing on the court, but I think it's at least above average. And so that's not really a big concern for me either. So if we're projecting him, 3 years down the line, we say that his athleticism is at least going to come back to a certain extent, that, like you said, he's not going to be getting cooked by all these small guards. Then, I think he certainly can be a good defensive player, though there's no reason he can't.
Yeah, the quick guard thing really kind of hurts me to think about, because if I thought, and I think he maybe can, I don't know, I'm having trouble putting a percent chance on it. If I thought he'd be able to catch up to quicker guards in the NBA, then I'd probably put him in my top 4, because I agree with you that he's smart on defense and he can read the game well. That pattern recognition is important. That was a big thing for Ben Simmons. And he can do that. And when guys are, bulkier than him or whatever, he's strongish in the post. I only think I saw him defend like 5 post possessions, but those possessions are fine. But quick guards just roasted him all the time, or his hips were like turned the wrong way. And I'm getting into your minutia here, and I don't want to get too far into that sort of stuff, because that can be corrected with coaching. But there's a lot of times he would just get blown by so fast that made me just go, that is where my biggest concern would be for him on the NBA level, is if he doesn't really improve maybe the technique there, that if he never gets good on those quick guards, he kind of is limited to guarding 4s or 3s that aren't as quick. And that is very limiting, despite the fact that his offensive profile is so strong.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. His quickness, his burst, the twitchiness isn't where it needs to be right now, for sure. But you made another good point that, especially for a kid his age, a lot of young prospects need to add strength, need to add physicality. He doesn't. He's got a very strong base. He's already physically developed. And I think the lack of strength can sometimes be overrated, especially with young guys. But prospects that do have strength as a strength to their game, I think that can be underrated as well. And so that's not something that's talked about that much, but it's even if he can't switch on to like ones, like quick ones, like the fact that he probably will be able to, with his length and his strong base, switch on to bigs a lot of time, like that is something that's also very helpful. So for example, I'm a Warriors fan, and going back to kind of the original death lineup, something that was very underrated about that was Harrison Barnes, who had a kind of a similar physical makeup to Griffin, not super quick, couldn't really guard the ones, but his ability to slide down the lineup and guard because of his strength and his base was something very valuable for the Warriors. And so we always think about it's more sexy switching onto guards, but a lot of guys can't switch down onto bigger players, and I think Griffin will be able to do that.
I do agree with all that. The Harrison Barnes specific thing was pretty interesting. I hadn't thought of it in that way before. So let's get back to offense for a little bit. The defense is something that I will have trouble firmly evaluating, I think, as I put together a full profile on him. Just it's not like it's different every game, but there's just like, I don't know if you're like this, but for me, there's always 1 or 2 possessions every game about a guy that really stand out in my head, and I can't shake them. It's impossible. And there was one against, Blake Wesley cooked him a few times, but I cannot remember who it was that he got cooked by that I just went, whoa, I got to type that down, And so it's stuck in my head there a little bit. I want to talk about offense a little bit. ISO drives in general, I don't think he'll be asked to do that in the NBA, but not going to beat guys off the dribble very often. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that I thought maybe he would be a little better at, but not the best there. And then the passing is the thing that is interesting to me, because as a guy who does have pretty good pattern recognition and kind of understands angles and where he needs to be, his passing's not there at all. Like he'll just kind of kick it out or traditionally swing it. I don't know where the passing development will come from, but I was kind of intrigued or interested in that. A guy like him who really is good at sets and weaving and getting to the right spots and knowing where his teammates need to be wasn't better as a passer.
Yeah, very low assist rate. I want to say like 6%, but I think you mentioned this earlier. All those rates for him are low. The assist rate's very low, but also the turnover rate's low and the free throw rate is low. And so that's a combination to me of a lot of different things. number one, the lack of spacing in college, especially because Boncaro, who was their best player and is a top 4 prospect, as I'm sure most of your listeners know, his main area that he liked to operate out of was kind of like the mid post or like the high post kind of elbow extended area. And so that takes out a lot of driving space for him. Plus, just the lack of spacing in general in college. And then the final thing is, I don't think that was really something that AJ Griffin was asked to do. He wasn't
Never.
asked to initiate offense.
Right.
He wasn't the creator for them. He was finishing possessions and spacing the floor to allow space for Boncaro and for Mark Williams to roll to the rim. And frankly, AJ Griffin did that very, very well.
Do you make anything of the low free throw rate? Because I actually thought he was pretty good at finishing with his body, but it never led to fouls, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, part of it is just that he didn't get into the lane that often. I mean, that's the one thing. That's why I don't really read that much into the low assist rate or the low turnover rate, because he just didn't. That wasn't really what he was asked to do. He was mostly a spot up guy. His usage wasn't. When he got the ball, he wasn't asked to get to the rim. That just wasn't part of their offense. Now, part of that, again, circling back to the athleticism, you could certainly argue that his physical limitations were part of that, but I would also argue that the scheme and his role in the offense was another part of that as well.
One more break here, guys, to talk about BetOnline.net, your number one source for all of your sports betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, Heat Sixers playing right now as I speak, and the start of the Major League Baseball season, all over on BetOnline.net, your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs to esports and more. The NBA playoffs all over on their Bucks. Not favored in Game 2 despite winning Game 1. Warriors favored in Game 2 after winning Game 1. They got all that over on their odds site, plus way more action up for a bunch of other sports. You can head over to that website today or use your mobile device and learn more about the trends in the action over at betonline.net. BetOnline is where the game starts. You talked about Bankero and, Mark Williams, obviously a prospect on that team as well. That was, I don't know how to say this, ground bound on offense, very close to the basket all the time.
Yeah.
So let's get to the NBA part of this, is why I'm bringing this up. Do you how much do you think more space will help or hurt him? Because I can see on offense, obviously, when you're a good shooter, providing space and using space is very helpful. And I think offensively that will help him. But I also think some of the limitations we talked about on defense, the more spaced out floor could hurt him. So how do you feel like on an NBA level, the skills he has and limitations he has, where do you feel like that translation is going to go?
No, so that's a great point. You use the terms guys that provide space and guys that use space. So, the guys that are going to be on the ball more, creating more for others, need the space that guys like AJ Griffin provide to them with the shooting ability. So I don't think that's much of a concern for him. If anything, I would say a lot of his value is that he fits anywhere in the modern NBA because of his spacing. So a lot of his value is that he provides that spacing for other people. And so I don't sure, that's going to help. He's going to get to the rim more than he did in college for sure. But I think more than anything, his value is that he fits anywhere due to his, plus size and length for the position, which hopefully down the line will end up yielding defensive versatility, but also just the ability to space the floor offensively with his shooting ability. And I think he'll be able to shoot it out past the 3-point line, a guy that will be able to, space out like you see some teams do, like the Milwaukee Bucks, for instance, like to space their guys even deeper out. That's something that he can do. And so I think he's going to be the guy providing the spacing more so for other players.
I definitely agree with that. And, not that I want to get too Pacer specific on NBA fit, but in general, with a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, offensively, that is as good as it gets to me in terms of, especially half court offense. That fit is brilliant to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the fit there together. Again, I like the fit with AJ Griffin anywhere. The thing is, I think if they were to pair together, they would need a slasher or a kind of more athletic guy in between the two of them, someone to put a little bit more pressure on the rim and open up kind of more of those kickouts to them. But if so, then I think that would be fantastic. There's a couple guys in this draft class that I think would be awesome fits in Indiana.
Who knew this whole time O'Shea Brissett was destined to be the connector between Tyrese Halliburton and AJ Griffin? What an odd career arc for him.
Yeah.
The defensive spacing in the NBA, I do think will be interesting for a guy like AJ Griffin. Like, he won't have, I mean, I guess with the Pacers, if they have Turner back next year, maybe, but he won't have an elite-ish rim protector behind him at all times anymore. So the limitations will be concerning, even if he is able to kind of grasp team concepts quickly and fit in on that end of the floor.
Yep, that'll be the thing for him defensively, how well he can close out, but then keep guys in front and recover. Yep, that's going to be kind of the number one question with him, just to monitor, because that's kind of the through line with his whole game is where can he get athletically? I know I've repeated this like 3-4 times now, but I mean, it's the through line with him, and it's going to define whether he's just like a solid role player that'll space the floor or if he's like a high-end starter for a good team.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you feel like there's anything critical about his game here that we've missed, or anything in this evaluation you're like, oh, we haven't even talked about XYZ skill that he's very good at?
No, I don't think so. I guess it just bears repeating again how good of a shooter he was for his age.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, coming into the season, I'm not sure how much your listeners followed college or the NBA draft, but Pat Baldwin was supposed to be the elite shooter that was kind of a taller wing. But it's funny because AJ Griffin ended up basically being that guy with Jabari Smith as well. So it's funny that usually when guys are that good of shooters at a young age, it's kind of like a smaller guard, but it's rare that we see both AJ Griffin and Jabari Smith, two guys that have size on the wing that both were just unbelievable shooters as freshmen.
Yeah, I think the shooting is a big part of why I rank him so high. Do you have a board fully done? Do you have a specific ranking spot for him at this time?
It's subject to
Yes.
change, but I do have him in the top 8. Yeah.
That where the Pacers should be on the 0.6% chance they end up at 9. We'll circle back on this conversation. Yeah, we did a Jabari last week on Locked On Pacers, and his the defense for him is the separator. The reason that he can be a 3 and D floor, I think, is why he's obviously has a higher spot on my board than AJ Griffin. But I think Griffin's a better shooter than him personally, just given his technique and form and his ability to go farther beyond the 3-point line. I think is a big factor for me there.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. So I actually, to finish this up, I had AJ Griffin as a top 3 guy coming into this season. So I've been on high on him for a while. I also had, not to call out all my wins because I not like I don't make mistakes too, but I was high on Jabari Smith too as well. Had him like as a top 7 guy coming in. Not a lot of people did. So been high on both of these guys for their shooting ability at that size. I do think if the athleticism comes back, I think AJ Griffin has a chance to have a little bit more kind of game off the dribble potentially than Jabari Smith. But like you said, the defense and the size with Jabari Smith at this point is just a little bit safer.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. To pit my own hits in the Locked On drafts, I keep getting so lucky. Like I think I picked Talon at 18 a few years ago instead of Bitadze. I picked Brandon Clark one year. I picked Sharif last year. You remember that? Yeah. That one did not pan out. But I've gotten very lucky, which is funny because I ranked Duarte pretty low last year, and then he turned out good. So I'm not allowed to pin my hits anymore when Duarte turned out to be very good.
Yep. Well, I was right there with you on the Sharif Cooper thing, and I'm not giving up yet. I just want to see him get a shot somewhere. So.
Yeah, that sucks because if he never plays that much, it's gonna look like I mean, not to make it about me, but like it's gonna be like, oh, well, you idiot, you had him top 10. I'm like, well, he played 16 NBA games. Like I can't do anything with that information. I hate when that happens.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Always excited to talk some of these prospects, especially like we were saying before the show. The Pacers are not always up there towards the top of the draft. And so it's fun to do kind of for a first-time thing this year in a while.
Yeah, for a while, everyone in Indy's favorite stat was they hadn't picked inside the top 10, not 10th, but inside of it since 1989 when they picked George McLeod out of Florida State. So Paul George and Eric Dampier, they picked exactly 10, but now they'll be picking single digits for the first time since before any prospect in this draft was alive, since before any Pacer from their most recent season was alive. Sam, thank you for the time. Much appreciated. I love diving into these prospects like this in this forum. Where can people follow you and all your draft content? Because Pacers fans are dying for more of that with the lottery coming up.
Yeah, you can follow me at DraftDummies on Twitter. I'm there always posting a lot of clips, both of the rookies. I guess the NBA season's now about over, but of mostly of the prospects coming up that are going to be drafted here in the next few months, plus my thoughts and a lot of stats. And then I'm a part of the podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network that is the NBA Draft Big Board show. So go ahead. If you're not following that yet, especially you Pacers fans with the draft coming up, you're going to want to hear a lot of that, our thoughts and insight as it pertains to the draft over the next month or so.
Yeah, if the Cavs had made the playoffs and the Pacers had top 10 pick, 18th pick, 31st pick, I'd have had to cover every player. Thankfully, I don't have to do the middle of the first round now, or else I'd have to cover basically every player. But if you want to listen to stuff on every player, that's your way to go. Raphael, Sam, everybody on our draft team is really excellent. Thank you for the time, Sam. Tomorrow, guys, we'll be reviewing player seasons again. I'm going to do veteran big. So Miles Turner, Domantas Sabonis, Goga Bitadze. Yes, he counts as a veteran from the Pacers' perspective. Coming up tomorrow. It'll be awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you then.